most of the business owners I deal with, they really don't know what drives the value of their business. And they arrive and say, I need to sell, I want to sell, I've got too much gray hair, I'm tired of running the business. Right. They haven't thought about a plan. They haven't thought about, okay, well, I'm 62, I want to retire when I'm 65. I need to go get some resources to help me think about how do I increase the value of the business. And so it's great that there are financial planners, advisors like you. How often do you find yourself playing that role where you feel comfortable when you're looking at somebody's business, talking to them about the deficiencies, about things they can and should do proactively to position their business?
Yeah, so actually, Lane, that's one of the reasons that I enjoy the Optima partnership so much, is because I know where you're from. I know, Andy Schwartz and what his background is. And so, Optima's ability to engage with the owner that's looking at an exit, that's looking at a transaction, I know it's going to be accurate. I know there's going to be preliminary due diligence. I know it's going to be, positioned well and things like that. And that's great. I think that's huge value that Optima's bringing to this. Where I sort of would fit into that is actually a step back from that. It's like, I'm thinking about this is what it looks like. Or even, we've had conversations like this, Lane, we've said, well, look, I see some problems here. And so, a lot of times we'll get involved with things like that. And a little bit, and I don't know, personality, or I think probably being an educator. I want people to understand, Lane. I'm a huge believer in education, obviously, and at least have some modest track record of being pretty good at distilling and making things make sense.
Right.
That's often actually where I think we add value, is because obviously, as you know, these things can become extraordinarily complex.
Yep.
And not just in an exit transaction, but acquisitions and all this other stuff, is the ability for us to kind of absorb all this and distill it down and say, okay, what it comes down to is this and this. And then if somebody's like, well, John, but, I'm like, it's okay, we can blow this out. We can go as deep as we want to, but that's an important thing, for us, is to actually really understand this at a microscopic's probably too far down, but at a fundamental level, and have the ability in that trusted role to provide that education, provide that explanation, as part of this, so that it can help get them comfortable with the transaction. Even things that's not what I wanted to hear.
Right.
I'm like, I understand that, but let me tell you why this is.
So just to jump in, because Lane, saying that you're a problem solver, and then you spoke about solving problems, and most of the time it's just being authentic and telling what they don't want to hear. But what are specific problems that you find most of the time? Because instead of speaking theoretical, like being a little bit more myopic and be like, because as a business owner, that's how I learn, is like, if you see somebody else driving off a cliff, it's like, okay, maybe I don't want to drive off that cliff. So what are some of the problems that you specifically have seen that you're like, hey, this is solve them before they happen?
Oh, okay, let me put just a temporary pin in that, because I want to give you an illustration of this ability to explain things. Earlier stage, before we get to exits, as companies are starting out, and I teach this at school, is what we'll have is, I have entrepreneurs come to me and go, oh, God, these venture capitalists, they're just trying to steal my company from me. They want 60% of this company, X, that. And I'm like, well, you need to understand how venture capital works. And there's a great Harvard, I think that's actually the title. It's old now, but it's How Venture Capital Works, Harvard Business Review article. But there's a mechanic to this. remember, they have other people's money. And the challenge, if you're a pure venture capitalist, is like, okay, you know, you've got 10 years, you know, maybe a 1 or 2 year extension on that. You know, I need you to produce 10x my money, and you're not in the marketplace. There's no hedge, there's no calls, there's no options. You know, I need you to pick and deploy this capital. And oh, by the way, we know that by the time you deploy 60% of it, you'll only have what you started with for the capital. So the last 40% is what's got to produce the returns. So once I can explain that, you know, in a very dispassionate sort of way, hey, look, they're not trying to take your company, but in order for this to work mathematically, they do need 60% of your company because they know what doesn't. And you know what? If you're wildly successful, you're all going to make more money than you can say grace over.
Well, real quick though, I think
Yeah.
it's education, because I would argue that most people don't even know the private equity venture capital world, and out of the ones that are familiar with that world, probably don't even know the differences between private equity and venture capital. Because the way I would understand it is, it's all about risk. So private equity is hey, the sure thing, which is no such thing, but in comparison to venture capital is
Right.
I'm gambling.
Yeah.
And I think most people just don't even know those differences. Obviously, in the world that y'all live in, people are very familiar with that world, but I'm just talking about the everyday American.
So Ryan, you've actually hit on something that's really important.
Do I get an A?
You get an A. You get an A relative to, well, for this portion
Got
of
it,
the
got it.
podcast.
No
you know.
guarantees. Yeah.
There'll be a final exam.
Got it.
And all this, but you know, relative to Optima, here's one of the things that people overlook. I'm a successful entrepreneur. I built a good business. I make really good money off this. And all this. That's great. And obviously you're smart and good at what you do. But you need to understand the people who are buying the business do this every day of every week, 52 weeks a year. They've just got more reps. They've got more experience. And so if you roll into this without somebody like Optima at your side, there's just no way that it's really, well, first of all, it's probably not going to get done, you know, because you're going to get frustrated along the way. And it's not going to be an optimum outcome with that. So I think that's an important takeaway. Is just understand that, and by the way, there is more money out there looking for transactions than there has been in the history of mankind.
Agreed.
So it's a great time. It's a great time to start a business, grow a business, exit a business. I want to go back to I don't want to forget your question, Ryan, about some problems, specific illustrations. And a lot of this, I'm going to go back to, our tagline at Churchill Terry, which is the value of a great marketing firm, has been for 30 years, business insight, financial foresight. And where that came from was I actually was working with the marketing firm that did this. He said, I've never had a conversation with you that I didn't walk away with a fresh perspective. You know, and I was very proud of that. That was meaningful to me. And so that's where he came up with the business insight, financial foresight. I have a longtime client that we work with, very successful. They actually, they built a portfolio of businesses, they exited, and now they're building another portfolio of businesses. Entrepreneurs they just want to keep doing this, right?
Right. It's the mindset.
So we had oftentimes we have a monthly financial review. We're doing the financial work for them, which is great. A monthly financial review, we're looking at, how they've done, and they've gotten off to a great start. They're a couple of years into this. They're looking at the third year. They're really hitting their stride. It's very profitable. It's growing very, very well, and all this kind of stuff. But we bring a level of thought and analysis to this that you normally would sort of see at a very large company. And we haven't done anything with this yet, but we're walking away and I'm kind of going, you know what? There are some serious disparities in certain clients and their characteristics and their profitability and others. And so haven't done the analysis, not suggesting they do anything with this or anything else. But what I'm going is, we need to show them, if you actually stripped out probably half the revenue, you'd have 3 times the profit. And so we help with that. We'll help with the, this insight, this observation, and then we can decide what to do. And quite frankly, I wouldn't actually advise them to get rid of half of their revenue, but I would advise them, let's take a look. What do we do to protect these highly profitable segments, and what do we do to move the rest of them closer to that? So that's just one sort of specific example.